Okay, in this video we're going to have a look at electrolysis, and this is going to be an introduction to electrolysis. In order to understand electrolysis, we have to go back to a little bit of work we've done before, which is looking at ionic compounds. Okay, so just a little recap of the important bits of ionic compounds. So you should remember that ionic compounds exist in an ionic lattice. This means they have positive ions, negative ions, positive ions, negative ions to form this structure. Each of the lines in between are the electrostatic attractions, and these electrostatic attractions hold the lattice together, hold the ions in place, and this means that as a solid, ionic compounds will not conduct electricity because the ions are not free to move. So the question is, what can we do to allow ionic compound to conduct electricity? And what we can do in here is we can either dissolve it or heat it up and make it molten. And when we do that, this lattice starts to break apart. So the lattice starts to come apart. Therefore, the ions are free to move and it will now conduct electricity. And we need, in order to do electrolysis, we have to have ionic compounds in either a molten or in a dissolved state in a solution in order for electrolysis to happen. We're going to explain that part next. Okay, so to understand electrolysis, let's just look at what the word means to help us understand this. Electrolysis is we're going to use electricity, and the word lysis means to break down, to break apart. So we use electricity to break down these ionic compounds in this process. So ionic compounds are broken down. The chemistry word for that are decomposed, and they break down into simpler substances using, and this is very important, a DC, direct current electrical supply. So electrolysis is breaking down ionic compounds into simpler substances using a direct current power supply. What does that actually mean in simple terms? Well, here's an example. Here is sodium chloride, an ionic compound, and if this undergoes electrolysis, then what we can do is split this into the elements. So we form sodium and we form chlorine. Remember, chlorine is diatomic, so Cl2. These are the elements, and these are a simpler substance than the compound that we started with. So this is what electrolysis does. Remember, in order to do this, these ionic compounds that we're talking about have to be molten or dissolved, and the reason they have to be molten and dissolved is so the ions are free to move, and when we have that, we call it an electrolyte. So if we have a molten or dissolved ionic compound, we call it an electrolyte, and again, this helps us to understand what the word means. Electro is to do with the charges, and light means loose, so the charges are loose. So electrolyte, loose charges, ions are free to move about.